The sterile hospital room was eerily quiet, punctuated only by the rhythmic beeping of machines that monitored Emily's vital signs. The fluorescent lights cast a harsh glare on the pale walls, reflecting the stark reality of the situation. Dr. Marcus stood at the foot of the bed, his brow furrowed in concentration as he checked the readings on the monitor. Emily lay motionless, her auburn hair spayed across the stark, white pillow, a stark contrast to the sterile environment surrounding her outside the room. The tension was palpable. Emily's family waited anxiously in the cramped hallway, their faces etched with worry. Sarah, Emily's mother, clutched a worn-out teddy bear in her arms, its fur frayed and dusty. A remnant of happier times, Tom. Her father paced back and forth, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, his jaw clenched tight. The couple had spent countless hours in this very spot, praying for a miracle, hoping for a sign that their little girl would wake up. How much longer do we have to wait? Tom's voice was strained, breaking the silence that enveloped them. He stopped pacing, turning to Sarah with a desperate look in his eyes. "I don't know, Tom," Sarah replied, her voice trembling. "But we have to believe she's still in there. She's a fighter." Dr. Marcus stepped out of the room, the faint click of the door echoing in the hallway. He regarded the couple with a compassionate gaze. "I've just finished checking her vitals. Everything remains stable. We just need to be patient. Tom scoffed, frustration bubbling to the surface. "It's been 5 years. How much longer can we wait for her to wake up?" Tom, Sarah interjected softly, placing a hand on his arm. "We can't rush. This Emily needs us to be strong for her, so she can feel our love, even if she can't respond." Dr. Marcus nodded in agreement, his expression serious. "Your emotional support is crucial. She may be unconscious, but it's important to keep talking to her. It's possible she can hear you." With a resigned sigh, Tom turned back toward the door, his heart heavy with a mix of hope and despair. As he peered into the room, he saw his daughter lying there still and silent, yet somehow beautiful in her vulnerability. He could hardly recognize her. The little girl who once filled their home with laughter and joy was now trapped in a body that wouldn't respond. Meanwhile, inside the room, Sarah settled into the chair beside Emily's bed, her heart aching at the sight of her daughter. With a trembling hand, she reached out gently, brushing a strand of hair away from Emily's face. "Oh, Emily, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Do you remember our trips to the lake? We used to catch fireflies and make wishes under the stars." Emily remained unresponsive, but Sarah continued her words, flowing like a river of memories. "You loved the way the water sparkled in the sunlight. You always said it looked like diamonds. I miss that smile of yours, darling. I miss everything about you." As she spoke, Sarah felt a wave of emotions wash over her: grief, longing, and overwhelming desire for her daughter to return. She could almost hear Emily's laughter echoing in her mind, a bittersweet reminder of the life they once had. "Can you hear me, love?" Sarah asked, her voice a mixture of hope and desperation. "We're all here for you, your dad, your friends. We're waiting for you to come back to us, Doctor." Marcus, watching from the doorway, felt a pang of sympathy for the family. He understood the deep bond that existed between them, and yet he couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. He had seen countless patients in comas, but there was something about Emily's case that intrigued him. After a few moments, Sarah's voice trailed off, and she sat quietly, her eyes fixed on Emily's face. The beeping of the machines filled the silence, a constant reminder of the battle they were all fighting, just as despair began to creep into her heart. Something remarkable happened. Emily's eyelids fluttered. Sarah's breath caught in her throat and she leaned forward, hope igniting within her. "Emily, can you hear me, sweetheart?" Tom rushed to her side, his eyes wide with disbelief. "What's happening?" With a sudden gasp, Emily's eyes shot open wide and filled with confusion. The room spun around her, the bright lights overwhelming her senses. She struggled to take a deep breath, her chest rising and falling rapidly as she tried to comprehend her surroundings. Sarah cried, tears streaming down her face as she reached for her daughter's hand. "Oh my God, you're awake!" Tom stood, frozen, his heart pounding in his chest after 5 long years. The moment they had been praying for had finally arrived. But as he watched Emily's eyes dart around the room, he noticed a flicker of something darker in her gaze. Dr. Marcus Sarah called out, her voice trembling with urgency. "She's awake!" Dr. Marcus rushed into the room, his eyes widening in astonishment. "Emily, can you hear? Can you respond?" Emily's gaze locked onto Dr. Marcus, and he could see the fear and confusion swirling within her. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out instead. She gasped again, as if she were trying to breathe life back into her lungs. "Take your time, Emily," Dr. Marcus urged gently, his voice calm and soothing. "You've been through so much. Just focus on my voice." But it was Sarah who broke the silence first. Her heart raced. "Emily, can you tell us what happened? Do you remember anything?" Emily's eyes darted to her mother, then back to Dr. Marcus, her brow furrowing, as if she were grappling with a memory that lay just out of reach. For a fleeting moment the room felt suspended in time, the air thick with anticipation, and then with a shaky breath Emily finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. I remember the words hung in the air, electrifying the room with a sense of urgency. Everyone held their breath, hanging on the precipice of revelation. The weight of unspoken memories bore down on Emily, and she looked deep into Dr. Marcus's eyes, as if seeking solace before unveiling the truth that had been buried for far too long. But what lay beneath those words? A terrible secret, a hidden past remained to be uncovered, leaving the family and Dr. Marcus on the brink of a journey that would forever alter their lives. The awakening had only just begun. Emily lay in the hospital bed, the faint hum of machines surrounding her like a ghostly choir. The sterile scent of antiseptic hung in the air, a constant reminder of the 5 long years she had spent trapped in silence after the abrupt awakening. She felt as though she were floating between 2 worlds, the one she had known before the accident and this new one, where whispers and hushed tones filled every corner of the room. The sunlight streamed through the window, casting a warm glow on her pale skin, but it did little to alleviate the chill that gripped her heart. Dr. Mara stood by her bedside, observing her, with a mixture of concern and curiosity. He had dedicated years of his life to understanding the human mind and body. Yet Emily's case was unlike any he had encountered, as she blinked slowly, processing the flood of sensations. Her eyes met his, and he noticed a flicker of determination behind the initial confusion. "Emily," he said, gently, his voice steady. "Can you hear me?" She nodded slightly, her forehead creasing as she struggled to find her voice. It felt like a distant echo buried deep within her, but she was determined to bring it back to life. The seconds stretched into what felt like an eternity, and finally she parted her lips, her voice barely above a whisper. "Dr. Marcus, can we talk, just us?" He raised an eyebrow, surprised yet intrigued. "Of course, I'll ask everyone to step out for a moment." As he stepped into the hallway, he gestured for Sarah and Tom, who had been anxiously waiting just outside, to take a seat in the waiting area, exchanged worried glances. Sensing the gravity of the situation, Emily's request for privacy was unexpected, and it only deepened their concern. "Do you think she's all right?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I think she needs space to express herself," Dr. Marcus replied, trying to reassure her. "Let's give her a few moments inside the room." Emily took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the world pressing down on her. She had so much to say, so much to uncover, but the words felt like heavy stones, lodged in her throat. Dr. Marcus returned, closing the door behind him, creating a small oasis of safety in the otherwise chaotic hospital. "Emily," he started, his tone softening, "I'm here to listen to what's on your mind." She hesitated, her hands trembling slightly as she played with the edge of the blanket. "I remember," she said slowly, her voice gaining strength with each syllable. "The day of the accident, it wasn't an accident, not really." Dr. Marcus's heart raced at her confession. "What do you mean?" He leaned in closer, his full attention on her, ready to capture every word. "I was there." She continued, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I remember everything, the fight, the yelling. I was scared. I thought it was just a regular day. But then it all changed. Can you tell me more?" Dr. Marcus urged, his voice barely above a whisper. He felt a chill run down his spine, sensing the gravity of what she was about to reveal. "It was my dad and someone else," Emily said, her brow furrowing as she searched her memory. "They were arguing. I didn't understand why it was loud and I wanted to hide. But then I saw something. Something I shouldn't have." "Emily, take your time." He encouraged, his heart pounding as she struggled to piece together her fragmented memories. "You're safe here." She looked directly into his eyes, her gaze fierce and unyielding. "I saw a man. He was angry, and my dad looked scared. Don't know what they were fighting about, but I had this terrible feeling something bad was going to happen. I tried to leave, but then everything went dark." Dr. Marcus felt a knot tighten in his stomach. "Emily, are you saying you believe your accident was related to this argument, that it was intentional?" She nodded, the weight of her realization pressing heavily on her shoulders. I think my dad was involved. I don't know how or why, but I feel it deep inside. It's like a shadow that won't go away." "Emily, it's important that we explore this further, Dr. Marcus said, his voice steady but filled with compassion. "You're not alone in this. We will find the truth together. I need you to promise me," she said, her voice trembling with urgency. "Promise me you won't tell my parents yet. I need to remember everything before I say anything. I can't let them know I remember. Not yet." Dr. Marcus hesitated to weigh her request against the ethical obligations of his profession. "Emily, I understand that this is difficult, but your safety is my priority. If there's something dangerous at play, I just need time." She interrupted, her eyes pleading. "Please, Dr. Marcus, I can't lose this chance to figure out what really happened. I need to remember everything first." He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her fear and desperation. "Okay, Emily, I will respect your wishes, but I want you to promise me that you will talk to me as soon as you feel ready." "Thank you," she whispered, relief washing over her. "It's so hard to remember, but I promise I'll try." As the tension in the room eased, Emily felt a small flicker of hope. She was finally beginning to reclaim her voice and her memories. Dr. Marcus sensed the shift and knew he needed to support her in this journey, no matter how daunting it might be. "Let's take this one step at a time," he suggested, his voice gentle. "You've come so far already. I believe you can do this with a newfound determination." Emily nodded. "I'll do my best." Dr. Marcus stood ready to give her space, but knowing that their journey had only just begun. "I'll be right outside if you need me. Just call." As he stepped out into the hallway, he couldn't shake the feeling that Emily's revelations would lead them down a path filled with darkness and uncertainty. He glanced back at her through the glass window, finding her staring at the ceiling, lost in thought. The weight of her unspoken truth hung heavy in the air, a storm brewing just beneath the surface. While he waited for Emily to gather her thoughts, he resolved to dig deeper into the circumstances surrounding her accident. He needed to understand the family dynamics and the events leading up to that fateful day. As he prepared to speak with Sarah and Tom, he knew that every question would be vital in uncovering the truth that Emily was so desperately trying to unravel. "Dr. Marcus," Sarah called out softly as he approached, her eyes filled with worry. "How is she? Is she all right?" "She's doing better than we expected," he replied, choosing his words carefully. "But she's been through a lot, and we need to give her the space she needs to process everything." Tom shifted uncomfortably, a shadow crossing his face. "What do you mean by that, Doctor?" Marcus paused, sensing the tension that lingered between them. "Emily mentioned that she remembers the day of the accident, and she has some concerns." Sarah echoed, her voice rising slightly. "What kind of concerns?" "Let's just say that she feels there's more to the story than what we initially thought," Dr. Marcus said diplomatically. "I think it's important that we approach this delicately." Tom's jaw tightened, a flicker of defensiveness in his eyes. "Whatever she remembers, it can't be true." She was confused. "She's been in a coma for 5 years. Dr. Marcus held his ground, aware that the truth could shatter their fragile family dynamic. Memory can be a powerful thing, especially after such a traumatic experience. It's possible she's piecing together fragments of her past. "Look, we just want her to be okay," Sarah said, desperation creeping into her voice. If there's something she needs to tell us, we're here to listen." "I understand," Dr. Marcus said, his tone softening, "but first, we need to ensure that Emily feels safe and supported. In sharing whatever she remembers, that's paramount." As the conversation drew to a close, Dr. Marcus knew he had a long road ahead, not only for Emily, but for her family as well. The truth was a delicate web, and he was determined to help them untangle it, no matter how painful it might be. Dr. Marcus stood in the dimly lit hallway outside Emily's hospital room, a notepad clutched tightly in his hand. The weight of her revelation pressed heavily on him. It wasn't an accident. The implications unraveled in his mind, like a frayed thread leading him to the tangled web of Emily's life. Determined to uncover the truth, he resolved to speak with Emily's family and friends, hoping that their insights would provide clarity about that fateful day. His first stop was the small waiting area where he found Sarah, Emily's mother. She sat hunched over her hands, clasped tightly in her lap, a faint tremor noticeable in her fingers. The flickering fluorescent lights overhead cast harsh shadows across her face, highlighting the worry etched into her features. "Sarah," Dr. Marcus said gently, approaching her. "Can we talk for a moment?" She looked up, her eyes red-rimmed and weary. "Is it about Emily? Is she okay?" "Yes, she's stable," he reassured her, choosing his words carefully. "But I need to understand more about her life before the accident. Can you tell me about the day it happened?" A shadow passed over Sarah's face, a mix of fear and reluctance it was. "Just an ordinary day. We were at home. I remember she went out to play with her friends. I didn't think anything of it." Dr. Marcus noted her evasiveness and pressed on. "Did anything unusual happen in the days leading up to the accident? Any arguments or tensions at home?" Sarah hesitated, her gaze dropping to the floor. "Things had been difficult. Tom and I were arguing more than usual. Work has been stressful for both of us." "About what specifically?" he asked, his curiosity piqued. "Just life," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Money, responsibilities." Emily was caught in the middle. "Sometimes I tried to shield her from it." But Dr. Marcus observed the way she struggled with her words, the shame hanging in the air between them. Did Emily ever express feeling unsafe or scared at home? Sarah's expression darkened and she shook her head vehemently. "No, she loved our home. It was her safe space. I swear we did everything to make her happy." He sensed the protective instinct surging within her. But the nagging doubts remained. What about Tom? How was his relationship with Emily? "Tom loves Emily. He's a good father," she insisted. But the conviction in her voice wavered. Sometimes he would get frustrated, but he never hurt her. "I would know." The doctor nodded, noting her defensiveness, and continued his inquiry. Was there anyone else in her life who might have caused her distressed? Friends? Perhaps. Sarah's brow furrowed as she thought Emily had a close friend. "Lisa. They were inseparable, but there was drama, teenage stuff. I didn't think it was serious." Dr. Marcus scribbled down Lisa's name. "Thank you, Sarah. I'll need to speak with her. If there's anything else you remember, please let me know." As he stepped away, Dr. Marcus felt a growing unease. He needed to speak with Tom next, but he sensed that the man would not be as forthcoming as Sarah. The doctor's instincts told him that there was more to the story, layers of complexity hidden beneath the surface. When he caught up with Tom in the hospital cafeteria, the man was hunched over a cup of coffee, his brow furrowed in concentration. Tom looked up as Dr. Marcus approached, a flicker of recognition crossing his face. Dr. Marcus said, his voice strained. "How's Emily?" "She's stable, but we need to talk," the doctor replied, taking a seat across from him. "I'm investigating the circumstances surrounding her accident. I'd like to hear your account of that day." Tom's demeanor shifted, his defensiveness palpable. "I told the police everything. It was an accident, a terrible, tragic accident. Let's start from the beginning." Dr. Marcus urged, his tone firm, yet compassionate. "What do you remember?" Tom took a deep breath, his hands tightening around the coffee cup. "Emily wanted to ride her bike. I was in the garage fixing the car. I didn't think she'd go far. Dr. Marcus echoed, sensing the man's inner turmoil. "Did she often ride her bike alone?" Tom's eyes darted away, avoiding the doctor's gaze. "Not usually, just it was normal the day. I didn't expect anything to happen, Doctor." Marcus leaned in closer to his voice, lowering. "Tom, I need you to be honest with me. Were there any arguments or tensions at home leading up to the accident?" Took expression hardened, and he finally met the doctor's gaze. "We were under stress, yes, but I would never hurt my daughter." "You can't even suggest that." "I'm not suggesting anything," Dr. Marcus replied, maintaining his calm demeanor. "I just need to understand the context. Was Emily as upset about anything? Did she say anything to you before she left?" Tom's eyes flickered with a mix of anger and fear. "She was a teenager. They get moody, it's part of growing up, but I swear I didn't hurt her." Dr. Marcus noted the desperation in Took's voice. "I understand you're upset, but I need to know if there's anything we're missing. If you're hiding something." "I'm not hiding anything." Tom snapped his voice, rising, drawing the attention of other patrons. "I just want my daughter to wake up. Please don't make this harder than it already is." The tension hung heavy in the air, and Dr. Marcus chose to back off. "For now, I appreciate your time, Tom. If you remember anything else, don't hesitate to reach out." As he walked away, the doctor couldn't shake the feeling that Tom was guarding a deeper secret. There was an urgency in the air, a sense that the truth was locked away just out of reach. He had to find Lisa, the friend Emily had been so close to, perhaps holding the key to unraveling the mystery. Later that day, Dr. Marcus found himself in a small cafe where Lisa had agreed to meet him. The place was filled with chatter, the clinking of dishes, and the aroma of fresh coffee, creating a warm atmosphere. Lisa arrived, her face a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Dr. Marcus, is everything okay with Emily?" she asked, her voice laced with worry. "She stayed, but I need your help," he replied, gesturing for her to sit. "I'm trying to piece together what happened before her accident. Can you tell me about your friendship with her?" Lisa nodded, her expression turning serious. "Emily and I were best friends. We did everything together, but things got weird before the accident." "Weird how, Doctor?" Marcus probed gently. "That there was drama with some other kids at school." She explained, her voice trembling slightly. "Some boys were bullying her, and it really affected her. She was scared to go outside sometimes." "Did she ever mention feeling unsafe or threatened?" he asked, leaning closer. "Yes, she did." Lisa admitted. "She said she felt like someone was watching her. I thought she was just being dramatic. But now I wonder, did she mention anyone specific?" Dr. Marcus inquired, his heart racing as he sensed he was nearing something significant. Lisa shook her head. "No, just that she felt uneasy. I didn't think much of it. I wish I had taken her more seriously." "Did you see her on the day of the accident?" he pressed, hoping to glean more information. "No, I didn't," Lisa replied, her voice breaking. "She was supposed to come over, but I got sick and she didn't want to leave. Wish I could have been there for her." Dr. Marcus felt the weight of regret settle in the air between them. "Thank you, Lisa. If you remember anything else, please let me know." As he left the cafe, Dr. Marcus's mind raced with the fragments of information he had gathered. Emily had felt watched, and Lisa's account hinted at a deeper fear that had plagued her. What had happened to her in those moments leading up to the accident, and who was the mysterious figure she had mentioned returning to the hospital? He found himself standing outside Emily's room once more. The beeping of machines, a constant reminder of the battle she was fighting. He knew he had to dig deeper to uncover the truth that lay hidden beneath layers of silence and fear. As he prepared to speak with Emily again, he felt a sense of urgency and a responsibility to protect her from whatever darkness threatened to engulf her future doctor. Maurus sat at his desk with a pile of notes and police reports scattered across the surface. The dim light from the desk lamp cast shadows that danced across the walls, mirroring the tumult of thoughts swirling in his mind. He had spent hours poring over Emily's case, but now a different kind of urgency gripped him. He needed to delve deeper into the family dynamics that had shaped Emily's life before her accident. With the unsettling revelations from Emily's first words still fresh in his mind, he resolved to speak with her, the family, particularly her parents. As he entered the waiting room, he noticed Sarah in a corner, her eyes fixed on the floor. She appeared lost in thought, the weight of her daughter's condition pressing heavily upon Her he approached gently, hoping to strike the right tone. Sarah, he began, his voice barely above a whisper. Can we talk? She looked up at her eyes, red-rimmed and weary. Is it about Emily? Is she getting better? Dr. Marcus hesitated, unsure how to respond. She's improving, but there are some things we need to discuss. It's important. With a nod, Sarah followed him to a quieter area of the hospital. The sterile scent of antiseptic hung in the air, a constant reminder of the reality they faced. Dr. Marcus and motioned for her to sit down. I've been gathering some information, not just about Emily's accident, but about your family, as well as a flicker of worry crossed Sarah's face. What do you mean? I've noticed tensions that seem to go deeper than what's been presented to me. Emily mentioned some things that could suggest a more complicated the situation at home, he said carefully. Gauging the reaction. She's been through so much, Sarah said, her voice trembling. I just want her to be okay. We all do. I understand, but sometimes family secrets can have a profound impact on our lives even if we don't realize it. Dr. Marcus pressed Sarah's expression, changed. The vulnerability in her eyes hardened slightly. You're suggesting that we're hiding something, that we're to blame for what happened to her? No, not at all, he replied quickly. But I believe it's critical to understand the full context of her life before the accident. It might help us piece together what happened. The tension in the room thickened as Sarah crossed her arms defensively. What are you implying? That we're responsible for Emily's coma? You don't know us, then help me understand, Dr. Marcus urged, leaning forward earnestly. What can you tell me about the family dynamics, anything that might seem out of the ordinary? Sarah paused, her expression shifting. As she considered his words, Tom, my husband has been distant lately. I thought it was just stress from work, but maybe it's something more. Dr. Marcus noted the way her voice faltered at the mention of her husband. What do you mean by more? She sighed heavily, as if the act of speaking was unearthing buried emotions. He's always been a bit secretive. There are things from his past he never talks about. I've tried to ask, but he brushes me off. I thought it was just his way, but now I don't know. Have you ever felt that there was something darker at play? Dr. Marcus pressed gently, hoping to draw her out further. I don't want to believe that, she whispered, tears pooling in her eyes, but I can't shake the feeling that there's something he's not telling me. Something that could have affected Emily. The weight of her words lingered in the air, and Dr. Marcus felt a knot tighten in his stomach. It's essential that you speak to him, Sarah. The truth may be painful, but it's necessary for Emily's healing. If on cue, Tom entered the waiting area. His face drawn and weary, he looked between Sarah and Dr. Marcus. Sensing the tension in the room, what's going on? He asked, his voice low and cautious. Tom, Sarah said, her voice wavering. We were just discussing Emily and some concerns I have about you. Took jaw clenched, and he stepped forward, crossing his arms. What concerns? Dr. Marcus thinks, Sarah began, but Tom cut her off. I don't want to hear what he thinks. This is about Emily, and I'm doing everything I can for her. I don't need you two discussing me behind my back. Tom, please, Sarah said, her voice rising slightly. This isn't about blame. This is about understanding what happened to our daughter. Dr. Marcus interjected. Tom, if there's something from your past that could help us understand Emily's situation, now is the time to share it. A silence fell over the three of them, the kind that stretched uncomfortably into the corners of the room. Tom's expression hardened, and for a moment, Dr. Marcus thought he saw a flicker of fear in his eyes. I don't know what you think you're doing, Tom said, his voice taut. This is not how we should be handling this. We need to focus on Emily's recovery, Tom. That's exactly what we're trying to do, Sarah replied, frustration creeping into her tone. But we can't ignore the fact that there may be something you're hiding. If you've been keeping secrets, it could affect her. He shook his head vehemently. You don't understand. There's nothing to discuss. I won't have you dragging up the past. Emily needs us to be strong, and not to tear each other apart strongly. Sarah's voice cracked. Is that what you call this, ignoring the truth? Pretending everything is fine when it's not? Dr. Marcus watched the argument unfold, feeling like an outsider in a storm. The air was thick with unspoken accusations, and he could sense the fractures widening between them. He cleared his throat at attempting to interject. Maybe we should take a step back. This is an emotional time for everyone, and we need to approach this delicately, but Sarah was relentless. Tom, if you care about Emily, you need to be honest with me, with all of us. What happened that day? Why were you acting strange before she went into that coma? Tom's face blanched and a flicker of anger crossed his features. You think I'm to blame, that I somehow caused this? You have no idea what you're talking about. The argument escalated, voices rising and emotions spilling over. I don't want to believe that you could have hurt her, Tom, but the more you refuse to talk, the more I fear that you might have enough. Tom shouted, the force of his voice reverberating through the walls. You're not going to turn this into the accusation against me. I love Emily. I would never hurt her. But as the words left his mouth, an unsettling silence enveloped them. Dr. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. He had seen the subtle changes in Tom's demeanor, the way he deflected questions and avoided eye contact. He sensed that the truth was lurking just beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to erupt in the midst of the charged atmosphere. Emily lay in her hospital room, her heart racing as she overheard the argument. The walls felt thin, and the emotions of her parents seeped through to her like a cold draft. They were supposed to be a family, united in their love for her. But now she felt the fracture, the chasm that had opened between them as she listened. A sense of dread settled in her stomach. She had been trying to piece together her memories, but the more she learned, the more she realized how deep the lies ran. The truth was like a dark cloud hovering above them, threatening to unleash a storm that could shatter everything she had known. The sound of her parents' raised voices echoed in her mind, and she squeezed her eyes shut, wishing she could block it all out. But the reality was inescapable. She needed to confront them, to demand answers about the secrets that had been hidden for so long. She could feel a growing resolve within her, a determination to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Little did she know, the revelations that awaited would shake the very foundation of their family, unraveling the ties that bound them in ways they could never have predicted. As she lay in the hospital bed, her heart heavy with the weight of uncertainty, she braced herself for the storm that was about to break. Emily sat up in her hospital bed, the sterile scent of antiseptic filling her nostrils. The faint beeping of monitors provided a rhythmic backdrop to the tumult of emotions surging within her. It had been days since she had awakened from the coma, and the initial joy felt like a distant memory, overshadowed now by a pressing need for answers and the weight of unsaid truths in the dim light of her room. She looked at her father, Tom, who sat in a chair across from her, his face a mask of worry. He had been there every day since her awakening. But now, as she gathered the courage to speak, she felt a chasm of unspoken words between them. The memories of that fateful day flickered in her mind, like fragments of a broken mirror, sharp and disorienting. She could still see the flash of the mysterious figure just before the accident lurking in the shadows of her memory. Dad, Emily began, her voice trembling but steady. I need to talk to you about the day it happened. Tom straightened in his chair, his eyes widening momentarily before a deep sigh escaped him. Emily, I know, she interrupted, her voice rising with a mix of determination and fear. I need to know what happened. I need you to tell me the truth. Was it really an accident? The tension in the room thickened, the air heavy with unspoken fears. Tom's eyes darted around the room as though searching for an escape. It was an accident, Emily. You know that there's nothing more to say. But I remember, she insisted, her heart racing. I remember everything leading up to it. There was someone there, someone who shouldn't have been. Tom's expression shifted, a flicker of panic crossing his features. Emily, you've been through a lot. Your memories might be mixed up. Sometimes our minds play tricks on us. No, she shouted, the frustration spilling over. You're the one who's playing tricks. I saw a figure. I saw you. The silence that followed was deafening. The accusations hung in the air like a storm cloud about to burst. Tom's face paled, and for a moment he looked as if the ground beneath him might give way. Emily, that's not possible. Where were you, Dad? She pressed, her voice softer but no less insistent. What were you doing that day? Why won't you just tell me? Tom's shoulders slumped. the weight of her gaze pressing down upon him. "You don't understand," he murmured, his voice breaking. I've made mistakes." "Terrible mistakes, then tell me," Emily urged, her voice rising again. "You can't keep hiding behind your lies. I deserve to know the truth, we all do at that moment." Dr. Marcus entered his presence, a calming balm amidst the storm brewing between father and daughter. He could sense the tension and the urgency in Emily's voice. "What's going on here?" he asked, his tone firm yet gentle. "Emily needs to know what happened the day of the accident," Tom replied, his voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Marcus nodded, stepping closer. "To Emily's bedside, it's important to talk about it, Emily. But it's equally important to approach this carefully. We don't want to overwhelm you." "I'm not overwhelmed," she snapped, her frustration spilling over. "I'm ready to face it. I just want the truth." Dr. Marcus exchanged a glance with Tom, who looked like a man cornered. "Emily," he said cautiously, "sometimes the truth can be painful, and it's not always easy to bear painful. What could possibly be more painful than waking up from a coma and realizing my life was shattered while I lay there?" she retorted, her voice rising. "I need to know if you had something to do with it." Tom's eyes glistened with unshed tears, a mix of shame and sorrow etched into his features. "I never wanted this for you, and you have to believe me, I would never hurt you." "Then tell me what happened," she demanded, her voice cracking with emotion. "I'm begging you," Dr. Marcus interjected, attempting to mediate the escalating tension. "Tom, perhaps it's time to be honest with her. She deserves that much." Tom ran a trembling hand through his hair, his defenses crumbling under the weight of Emily's piercing gaze. Okay, he stammered. "But you have to promise to listen and not jump to conclusions, Ions." Emily nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. "I promise. On the day of the accident, I was at the bar," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I was supposed to pick you up after school, but I lost track of time. I didn't think anything would happen. I didn't know you would." "What, Dad?" She pressed, her heart racing as the pieces began to fit together. "What didn't you know?" "I didn't know you would leave school early that day," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "And I didn't know that you would run into someone who," she demanded, her frustration mounting. "Who was I?" With Tom glanced at Dr. Marcus, who nodded encouragingly, urging him to continue. "I heard rumors, Emily," he said, his voice trembling. You were with someone I didn't want you to be around. I thought I could keep you safe by keeping you away from those who," she insisted, her heart pounding as a sense of dread crept over her. "Who was it, Dad?" "The boy from the neighborhood," Tom finally admitted, his voice cracking. "He has a reputation. I didn't want you to get involved with him. I was trying to protect you." Emily's mind raced, the pieces of the puzzle colliding in her mind. A boy, the figure she had seen. "What happened after that?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't know them. I wasn't there. I didn't know until it was too late," Tom replied, tears streaming down his face. "I'm so sorry. I should have been there for you." Just as Emily opened her mouth to respond, a sudden wave of dizziness washed over her. She felt the room spinning, her vision blurring as she struggled to stay focused. "Dad, she stammered. But before she could finish her thought, darkness enveloped her, and the world faded to black. "Emily!" Tom shouted, leaping to her side as Dr. Marcus rushed forward. Panic etched on his face. Someone call for help. The sound of alarms blared, and chaos erupted in the room as nurses flooded in, their voices a blur amidst the frantic energy. Tom's heart raced as he watched his daughter slip away from him again. The weight of their conversation lingering in the air like a ghost. He felt helpless, a bystander in a tragedy he had tried to prevent, but had somehow contributed as the medical team worked to stabilize Emily. Dr. Marcus shot Tom a concerned glance. "We need to figure out what's happening with her. This is serious." Tom's heart sank. He had wanted to protect Emily, but now the truth was unraveling, and he feared the consequences of their revelations. He felt like he was losing her again, and this time he might not have the chance to make things right. Emily stirred awake, her mind racing with clarity that had been absent for so long. The sterile scent of the hospital room, once a blur of confusion and despair, now felt acutely vivid. She blinked at the bright overhead lights, and as her gaze settled on Dr. Marcus, a sense of urgency washed over her. "Doctor," she said, her voice hoarse yet firm. "I remember everything." Dr. Marcus leaned forward. Intrigued yet cautious, the last time Emily had spoken, her words had been fragmented, filled with fear and uncertainty. "What do you remember, Emily?" He asked, his tone encouraging but laced with skepticism. There was a fight. She began, her brow furrowing as memories flooded back. "I saw two people arguing. I was scared." She hesitated, the weight of her recollections pressing down on her. "One of them was my father, and the other I don't know who it was, but they were angry. Really angry." Dr. Marcus jotted down notes, his pen moving swiftly across the page. He could see the resolve in her eyes, a determination that had been missing before her coma. What happened next prompted his heart to race with the potential implications of her words. There was shouting. She continued, her voice trembling slightly. "I was hiding, but I saw them. I heard my dad say something like, 'You don't know what you're dealing with.' Then there was a crash, and I felt like I was falling." The doctor's brow knitted together as he proved access. "Here, account falling. How, Emily? Were you pushed? Did you see someone else?" "I don't know," she exclaimed, frustration bubbling to the surface. "Everything's jumbled, but I remember their faces, Dr. Marcus. I can't forget them." She paused, her expression shifting. "Please, you have to believe me. I know it sounds crazy, but I think my father was involved in something terrible." "Doctor," Maris took a deep breath, the gravity of her revelation sinking in. "What do you mean by involved? Were they fighting about something specific?" Emily looked down, her fingers trembling as she gripped the edge of the blanket. "I don't know what it was about, but I saw my dad with that man. I think they were meeting for a reason. Something bad." "Emily," he said gently, "I need you to think carefully. Can you describe this man? What did he look like?" She closed her eyes, focusing on the fragments of her memory. "He was tall, with dark hair. I think he wore a leather jacket. I can't remember much else, but I know he was dangerous. I could feel it." "Did you see where they went?" Dr. Marcus pressed, sensing the urgency of her words. "No," Emily replied, shaking her head. "But I remember feeling scared, like something terrible was going to happen, and then it did." Just then, the room's atmosphere shifted. The door swung open abruptly, and Tom ended, his face pale and eyes wide with concern. "Emily, are you okay?" he asked, his voice strained. "Dad," she shouted, her heart racing, "I need to talk to you. It's about the day of the accident." Tom's face contorted with a mix of fear and defiance. "Not now, Emily. You need to rest." "No," she insisted, her voice rising. "I remember things, Dad. I remember you fighting with someone. I need to know what happened." Dr. Marcus observed the dynamic. With a keen eye, noting the sudden tension in the room, Took's body stiffened, and for a moment, it seemed he might evade her questions. "Emily, you're not well. We can discuss this later," he said, his tone more commanding than comforting. "No," she shouted again, her emotions spilling over. "You can't just brush this off. I saw you. What do you think you saw?" Tom retorted, his voice rising defensively. "You've been in a coma for 5 years. You don't know anything about that day." Emily's heart sank at his words, the denial palpable in the air. "But I do. I saw you and that man. You were angry." Dr. Marcus stepped in, sensing the volatility escalating. "Tom, let's take a moment here," he said, trying to mediate the growing tension. "Emily is trying to share what she remembers. It's important." Tom scoffed, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "You think she can just wake up and remember everything? This is absurd." "Is it absurd? Or are you afraid of what she might reveal?" Emily's voice pierced through the air, her determination unwavering. Tom's expression shifted, a flicker of something darker crossing his face. "Emily, you need to stop this. You don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying," she shot back, her voice steady, despite the fear simmering beneath the surface. "You're hiding something from me, and I deserve to know the truth." Before Tom could respond, Emily felt a wave of dizziness wash over her. Everything around her spun, the room fading in and out of focus. "I can't," she stammered, her breath quickening. Dr. Marcus rushed to her side, concern etched on his face. "Emily, "Stay with me," he urged, but her vision blurred, and the world around her began to darken. "Emily!" Tom shouted, panic flooding his voice as he reached for her. In that moment, the door burst open again, this time with police officers trailing behind. The room was suddenly filled with the authority of the law. "Marcus, we need to speak with Tom," one of the officers stated, his tone leaving no room for argument. Tom's face was drained of color and he stepped back, his eyes wide with fear. "What's going on?" he demanded, but the officers stepped forward, their demeanor unyielding. "Sir, you're under investigation," the leader officer said, his voice firm. "We have reason to believe you may have been involved in a crime related to your daughter's accident." Emily's heart raced as the implications of their words sank in. She looked between her father and the officers, her mind racing with the truth she had just begun to piece together. No, it can't be true," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Dr. Marcus's mind whirled, grappling with the moral dilemma of revealing Emily's testimony. He could see the fear in her eyes, dawning realization of a darker truth. She had already suffered so much, and now it seemed the very foundation of her family was crumbling around her as the officers moved to apprehend Tom. Emily felt a mix of emotions swirling within her: fear, anger, confusion. She had awakened from her coma, only to be thrust into the nightmare that she had long been shielded from. The truth was out there lurking in the shadows, and she was determined to uncover it. No matter the cost. In that moment, she realized she was no longer just a victim. She was a survivor ready to confront the darkness that had encased her life for so long. The truth would be unveiled, and she would face it head-on,